Okay, so today we're going to talk about the revolutions of 1848 and their impact on society. And we have to know right away that revolutions are going to happen everywhere on the continent except for England. And England doesn't have these revolutions because their parliament was made of middle class, and those guys were already working to make sure that rights were there, and so they didn't really have to take to the streets. So the first thing that we're going to see is the Reform Act of 1832. And what this is going to do is Parliament's going to do a little bit of redistricting, gerrymandering kind of thing, and it is going to actually double the number of eligible voters. Unfortunately, the most of this will benefit the middle class and the upper middle class, but that's okay because the steps have been made, and once you start a trend, it's just going to keep going. Now, one of the acts that they did that was not so good was called the Poor Law of 1834. And this is that idea that poor are lazy. If you give them anything, they'll just get lazier. And so what they're going to do is build workhouses, and if you don't pay your debt, you have to go and live at the workhouse. And their whole mentality was, well, get a job and get out of the workhouse. They made conditions so horrible that people would rather die than go there. One of the great things that they'll do is repeal the Corn Laws, and that is by Robert Peel in 1846. And if you remember back, what the Corn Laws were is that they put really high tariffs on grain that came in from the continent so that everybody had to buy English grain, which also allowed the English to raise the prices really, really high. And so when we repeal these Corn Laws, what we're going to see is a drastic fall of bread prices. And so although those masses might not have gotten the vote yet, they are now being fed, so that's always good. And so the revolutions of 1848, we can say that the English were non-participants, that the English were a happy bunch, and they supported the Reform Acts and the Corn Law repeals. And, but we're going to have a whole different story then on the continent. Now, here are the participants of the 1848 revolutions on the continent, and you can see that it's just about everybody. And of course, France leads the party, because they do so well with revolutions. Now, all of these revolutions had the same causes. First of all, the people believed that there was an abuse of power, and they had also been going through a recession. So you have several years of poor crops adds to their unhappiness, and the fact that the government wasn't handling the problem very well. All of them had the same demands. They want more control over their governments. They want reform now, and of course, the middle class wants more opportunities and rights. Remember, on the continent, we still have a lot of feudal laws going on, and of course, suffrage wouldn't be bad. So let's start in France, where it starts. And we have King Louis Philippe and Louis Blanc. King Louis Philippe is the cousin of Napoleon the 16th. I'm sorry, Louis the 16th. And Louis Blanc, we know, is a reformer and a revolutionary. And although Louis Philippe is considered the citizen's king, he just wasn't able to make the changes as fast as the people demanded. In East Prussia, we have a really interesting story when Frederick William IV, who also was a romantic and believed in the feudal idea of kingship, where everybody had a role to play and everybody needed to play that role. He was actually an anti-absolutist, and when Frederick William's people came to him and demanded rights, he actually goes out and says, okay, everybody, I hear you, let's make some changes, and they get happy and they leave, and then William brings in the military to put down the last remnants of revolution. But even with that, the people thought he was awesome, And the Frankfurt Diet actually offers him the crown of unified Germany, which he declines, saying that although he's not an absolutist, he doesn't believe that the people should vote to give him a crown, that he deserves it by right. So that's kind of interesting. Although we do see quite a few advances due to the revolution in Prussia, one of the things that the people were upset about is no jobs, no money, no food. So they began a massive railroad construction and encouraging industrial development. So what that's going to do is it's not only going to help my economy, but it's going to put everybody to work. And because Frederick William was such a romantic, he really loved, opera and ballet and the arts, and so he's going to put in favored legislation for that. And there's kind of a thing you need to remember is that if culture is flourishing, then it's peaceful. Okay? So let's look at Italy. Italy was a quagmire of revolutions. Remember, they are 5 to 7 city-states, and the two that will lead the party is Mazzini and Garibaldi. Now, Mazzini is a brilliant revolutionary and reformer. He spends most of his time agitating from other countries, though. He was exiled from Italy, but that didn't stop him from demanding change in Italy. Garibaldi is going to be the guy on the ground. He's kind of got a man crush on Mazzini, and he is going to agitate for reform on the ground. Garibaldi was also kind of a professional revolutionary. He will go to Uruguay. He will help them with their revolution. He actually shows up in New York, asks if we want one. So he's, but in Italy, he is very much admired. Now, I want you to know that all of them fail. All of the revolutions across Europe fail. And the reason for it is that as these new political parties fought over the wording of their new constitutions, of what their constitutions would look like, while they bickered, the old regimes kind of came back in and stepped up and said, we got it from here. Thank you for showing us the error of our ways. Also, revolutionaries were not interested in becoming too radical. That's not to mean that there wasn't violence. I mean, if you've seen the movie Les Mis, you know that there was violence, but they weren't willing to go to the terror extreme or to regicide. And whenever it looked like it was going to go that way, the people started to pull their support for the revolutions. Just because they all failed does not mean they don't have a positive impact. First of all, everybody gets on the parliamentary type government bandwagon, and the idea of suffrage takes hold. Germany and Italy realizes that if they're going to play with the big boys, they're going to have a unified country. They can't be these little fragmented states anymore. And that's it. And thanks a lot.